our message. Our message today is not whole is not unholy. Not whole is not unholy. And you could probably add some verbiage in there. Not whole is not necessarily not unholy. But we're going to stay with the theme as it is. Not whole is not unholy. I want you to keep that in your mind throughout. This song is a year old. I understand from speaking to Junior Cartino this morning that there's an album around this song and around this person's music. I'm guessing most of you have heard this song, only because it's had so many hits on YouTube. Having said all of that, I'm still playing this because it fits and I hope it sets a tone. The song, as it was written, as this young woman says, it was written late one night in her darkest moments. She said, not all songs are written from such darkness, and I think that was her double entendre when she said from such darkness. But this one was, and it is a song to herself. It's a love song written to herself. And written to all of us. So I hope it's a blessing to you. And then I'll go a little further with my explanation on that, if you'll just bear with me, if I can find this. Okay. I don't belong. I know that. I didn't have the upbringing that everybody I had met in the business had. As I trained for 3 months back in Fort Lauderdale, everyone around me were entitled, were people of entitlement. I don't know how else to say that, but they had been raised differently. Some would say right, but I got to know them a little too closely, so I know they weren't raised right. But anyway, they were raised differently than I was. So in every sense of the word, I was out of place, and I felt so lost. I've had that feeling before. I've had that feeling since. But it was a significant moment as I stood in the middle of San Francisco, California, across the country from where anything safe was. My wife was home by herself for a month. My parents and my brother and sister were all away from me. I had nobody. And it was an extraordinary feeling that I would not trade for anything. That experience and that memory of standing on that corner, not knowing where to go, who to reach out to, how to find my way. I mean, as lost as I could have been, without being significantly lost, how some people are. I wrote down, I hope you don't mind that I read this, but I wrote down the things I felt. And I would guess that people who have a feeling of loss or feel lost more specifically have something, if not all of these, in common with me. First, I felt helpless and vulnerable. I didn't write this one down, but I felt exposed. I felt like anyone who saw me knew how lost I was. And so I did this quick thing of trying to hide that I was lost. Hide that I try to fit in, and I didn't know what I was fitting into. But I felt that desperation. I was uncomfortable, definitely uncomfortable. I remember feeling like I don't know anything about this town. All I knew is being born in 1958, I wanted to at least get to Haight-Ashbury, the corner of Haight and Ashbury. I don't know if anyone is has any memories from the Woodstock era and all that took place on Haight-Ashbury. I had zero desire to indulge myself on all that took place on Haight-Ashbury, but I wanted to be at that corner. That's all I knew about San Francisco at that point. But the surroundings, unfamiliar completely. I remember feeling emotionally lost, which was probably the most desperate of all my feelings of loss in that moment. Almost numb, like I don't know what to do. I was paralyzed. Maybe fear. I didn't write fear down, but maybe paralyzed in fear of all that I've described. Fearful that I was going to not find where I was going. Fearful that I was going to find where I was going. Because once I got there, I knew I didn't fit. They were going to know quickly that I wasn't cultured, that I didn't know what I was doing, that I thought they were going to wash me out in 2 weeks and say, how did they send this guy from Fort Lauderdale? He doesn't understand. He doesn't fit. Get him out of here. 40 years later, it's been my life, by the way, in this career. I felt like, I don't know how to say this. I felt like everything was in question. You know, there was this moment of complete desperation. What I remember, I'll say it this way so you understand. And I hope you're understanding there's much more depth to what I was feeling. It's anyone, I think, who feels lost. I remember feeling, I don't even know if I know how to get back to my apartment. I can't read because I was following a crowd. I don't even remember where my apartment is. And so in that moment, there was this feeling of desperation. Most importantly, I was not myself in that moment. I'd worked for my dad. I had worked in sales. I had worked in all kinds of different places for years before, up and building myself to a career. And then I lost one of those jobs. I was too prideful to go back to my father. I moved all the way down to Fort Lauderdale. Maybe I used that as an excuse, but it was mostly pride that I didn't want to go back to my dad with my proverbial tail between my legs. So everyone in my branch, in Hollywood branch at church, worked for the post office. So I applied at the post office and I got that job. And so right before I became a financial advisor, I was a mail carrier. And I don't know what other resumes people were sporting at that point, but I can almost guarantee you no one else delivered mail for the US Post Office before they became, in the old terms, we used to call them stockbrokers. So I'm pretty certain I was the only one with that on my resume, and that made me feel inferior. So I was just standing on this corner, no tears outside, weeping inside, just feeling lost. Nightbird says, it's okay. But it's not. In those moments, it's not. But the reason she said it's okay, I believe, is what she said afterwards. We're all a little lost. All of us. This morning, Candace and I got here early. I hope I remembered to compliment her how sharp she looks. Jimmy walked in the back door, and first thing I did when I greeted him, I said, wow, you just look so sharp today. So we get all done up for church. But it doesn't change what we feel inside. We get prettied up and shined up, but that doesn't change how you felt. It didn't matter what I was wearing on that corner in that moment. I was in my suit and tie, but I could have been in short pants and little white socks and what are the white and black shoes called, Candace? Like kids wear, white and black, like not stripes, but black on the front. You're drawing a blank. What are they? Saddle, whatever. Yeah, I could have been in that outfit with a little bow tie. I felt like I was 5 years old. They could have dressed me like a little 5-year-old standing out there because I felt so vulnerable. But I was dressed up, and anyone who saw me would have maybe even thought, look at that successful guy standing on that corner. Far from it. We come into church, and sometimes we're all shined up, and we think to ourselves, I'm feeling so lost, so broken in this moment, and no one knows it. And I have sat in meetings with the saints feeling as lost as I felt on that street corner in San Francisco at times because of me. This is not an indictment on anyone, but my getting myself into this position of feeling lost. Reminding you what our theme is. Our theme is not whole is not unholy. So it's okay, might be the right statement, in fact. I know I preached this sermon a couple years back, but I'm going to repeat it. My mom understood this theory. My mom understood this phenomenon. My mom at 65 years old understood the normalcy of what I'm addressing today. She said to me, isn't it great to be dependent? And I've repeated this to you, but I'm going to repeat it again in case there's someone here who has not heard it or forgets. And I said to her, no, it doesn't feel good to be dependent. She said, no, you're not understanding what I mean. Isn't it great to be dependent on God? And I understood the wisdom of her question in the moment. With all she had accomplished, and this is not to spew her resume, her verbal resume to you all, but this was a learned woman. She had her doctorate. She was very, very accomplished. And at age 65, in all that she had done, she came to this conclusion. Isn't it great to be dependent upon God? Isn't it great to confess, I'm not whole? And I repeat, not whole. Being not whole is not necessarily being unholy. Understand that. It's not unholy. It's just human. I believe Paul came to an understanding. I believe Paul the Apostle was a learned man, much as I said about my mom, was a learned man, but arrogant in his learnedness. He was accomplished. He was the greatest enemy, the most powerful enemy to the new church in just after the days of Christ. He was the guy. He was the guy who was gathering information and using that information to torture the church, tear the church down, take the lives of certain individuals in the church with all his thoughts on destroying the church, feeling very right in all that he did. He learned what my mom knew at age 65. When he asked God to heal him, 3 times, he says, 3 times he asked. And I've said this to you before again. I don't know if it was 3 separate times in a day, or if it was 3 times of sustained asking, praying, taking a month to just ask for a healing. I don't know what 3 times meant to Paul, and I'm not here to interpret that, but he calls it 3 times. And he finally heard the voice of God speak to him. My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Not being whole is not unholy. It's in those gaps, those weaknesses, that incompleteness, that feeling of being lost, whatever it is, that God works most beautifully in your life. For my strength is made perfect in weakness. I think the pronoun your is missing from that, but it's assumed. My strength is made perfect in your weakness, making it personal to Paul, but we accept it as it is. Most gladly, said the Lord, most gladly said Paul, after repeating the words of the Lord to him. He said, most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. If my weakness exposes God's strength in his perfection, then bring weakness to me, said Paul. I rather glory in mine infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. That is a man with understanding, having served in what he felt was perfection and strength. He moved from arrogance to humility. And that's what life can do to you. Maybe I talked to my mom when she was 45 or 50 and she just got her degree. Maybe she wouldn't say, isn't it great to be dependent? Maybe she would have felt very independent. She was definitely a woman of the 60s and the 70s. Trust me on that one. Fighting for equality, fighting for rights, fighting against things. And no one has to know what things I mean in this. Just know in her house, in her household, that fight for equality was a strong fight. So I don't know that she would have always said, isn't it great to be dependent? But she did at 65. Maybe frailty, maybe weakness, maybe seeing things with more clarity than she ever had. I don't know. But her wisdom was not lost on me. Certainly was at first, because I came back at her probably with arrogance. No, it's not good to be dependent. And she introduced me for the 100th time to humility. And I embraced it in the moment. Jesus said this in Luke 7, 31 and 32, if you care to go to that. And then I think you know this, but it was 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter that I read concerning Paul, if you want to go to that for homework this week. Luke 7, 31 and 32, Jesus answering said unto them, they that are whole need not a physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. Sometimes I think we read that as a one-time occurrence in our lives. For me, this is July 27, 1976. But let me let you in on my truth. This is also July 9th, 2022. He's still calling in my weakness to strength. He's still reminding me that I have a ways to go. He's still reminding me that I'm dependent because I am not whole. I still need the physician. Luke 19:10 says this, for the Son of Man, speaking of Jesus Christ, is come to seek and to save that which was lost. Yes, that applies to that day at a camp out in Kansas for me, but it applies every day since. I have found myself lost, maybe in a moment, maybe in a time period, but certainly lost at times. Discouraged, confused, whatever it might be. It could be as small as Candace and I having a disagreement and feeling lost in that moment. I tell her often as my best friend, when there's space between me and she who I have identified as my best friend, when there's space, it creates confusion for me. It's almost, and I don't say this for guilt, but if guilt works, I'll use it. But if not you, who? And so he rescues me in that time. And he says, if not her, me. Continuing to train me and teach me. Maybe he's the one who's saying, it's okay. I don't know. Because, as he told Paul, it's in that weakness that his strength is made perfect. He said this, and I'm going to read the house of Israel, and then I'm going to read it differently. He answered and said, and this is Matthew 15, he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now I'm going to abbreviate that, because I just did my ancestry.com, and I don't think I'm of Israel. 90-something% of me is the Balkan Peninsula. I have the other 7% is Italy. They're really close, so I don't know which generation, but somewhere the Balkans met the Italians. But other than that, I'm pretty much on that other peninsula. Because I'm of this descent, I hope no one's offended by this. I call it the slums of Europe. I'm from the slums of Europe, down in the Balkan area. If you look at that part of the world, you'll understand. So that's where I come from. I don't think that's Israel. I don't believe it is. So I'm going to abbreviate what I just read to you in Matthew 15. I am not sent, said Jesus Christ. I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep. He is here to find us and gather us and keep them among his flock. We who were lost now are found, but all sheep stray. All sheep wander from the flock. It's a beautiful parable. Wouldn't you leave the 99? I am testimony to that. He has left the 99 for me. I hope you have the same testimony. I hope it's not often, but I hope you have the same testimony where you know that you were valued by the Lord and he came and found you and brought you home. Not that anyone is questioning 1984 and what happened, because I'm here today, but I did find my way to the office that morning. I did find my way to the office before 8 a.m. And I did walk into an office, a huge training room of probably 50 to 100 young people, similar in age. I was 26. We probably went as high as maybe 35 or 40, but the majority my age. All but one from the west side of the Mississippi. In so many ways, I felt completely out of place. We were placed at tables. They put me in the front row, right in front of the speaker. It's just where my name was. Never would I have chosen that seat. So everything about it made me feel awkward and different and lost. But my testimony is, but recovered. Not just in San Francisco, not just in Kansas, not just in LaGrange, Kentucky, but in every place that I've been. In every time that I've felt lost, whether it was sickness, whether it was job related, whether it was family related, whether it was emotional, whatever reason, just spiritual discouragement, whatever reason, I found myself in a position of feeling lost. My testimony is, now I'm found. So my testimony is, it's okay, because in my weakness, his strength was made perfect. This Tuesday night, we'll finish our 3-session seminar on the search for greatness. I don't mention that for a commercial, but if it works that way, good. I say it instead to say, my message has been consistent. Strive for perfection. Strive for the glory that God intends for you. His glory in your life. The greatness he has intended for you, each one of you individually. But if you're stumbling, and if you're aware of yourself to such a degree that you feel lost, if life, which you may have had zero power to change, by way of whatever would define your feeling lost, know this, that it's when we're lost that God does his best work with us. I am not encouraging you to find yourself lost. I'm encouraging you to find yourself found. Strive for good greatness. Strive for perfection. Strive to honor him. Glorify him in all that you do. But if you find yourself in that place for whatever reason, might the glory of God shine upon you. Might his mercy and grace, my grace is sufficient, he said, shine upon you. All that I experienced on that corner, I'm so thankful for. I felt different and inadequate because of where I came from. I felt different and inadequate because of the way I looked. So different from the people around me. I felt different and inadequate based on what I was walking into. And yet the Lord rescued me again and again and again and again and again. Even that morning, I remember standing on a corner in San Francisco, California, not knowing which direction to go, looking buttoned up like I had everything together, and praying, pouring my heart out to God, weeping inside. Lord, help me. I don't know where I'm going. And I wonder how many times that is repeated in people's lives. Not necessarily geographically, but not knowing where we're going by any other way to define that. And I say to you today that if you feel lost, it's okay. But it's only okay because God is there to rescue you. Don't feel different. Don't feel like you're the only one who's lost. In that moment, I knew I was the only one lost. Far from it. As this beautiful, beautiful spirited woman said, it's okay. We're all a little lost. Today, I want to validate if that's where you are and say to you that it's in that loss that getting yourself to a position of being found is when you can identify God in your life. May the Lord bless each one of you, that you might, if I was lost in every way possible in that moment, might you be found in every way possible. May the Lord bless each one of you.